There is a number, not a metaphor, not a philosophical abstraction, a number. It is the estimated count of civilizations in our galaxy capable of producing a detectable signal. Scientists have calculated it, peer-reviewed it, published it in journals with clean white margins and careful footnotes. The number is not 1. It was never supposed to be 1. And yet, the radio is silent. The frequencies are clean. The sky, examined with instruments of extraordinary sensitivity, returns nothing but the ambient hum of a universe that appears by every measurable metric to have no one else in it. This is not a mystery. This is a crime scene. My name is Gideon. This is what the evidence says. In the decade after the second global catastrophe of the 20th century, human beings decided to look up. This requires a specific kind of psychology, the psychology of a species that has just demonstrated its capacity for industrialized murder on an unprecedented scale, and has chosen, in the immediate aftermath, not to process that information, instead to redirect, to project the excess energy of technological ambition outward toward the stars, as if the cosmos might provide what the civilized world had failed to deliver. The optimism of the 1950s was a structural response to trauma. It was not organic, it was engineered. In 1950, at Los Alamos National Laboratory, the facility that had recently perfected the mechanism for ending cities, a physicist named Enrico Fermi sat down to lunch with colleagues and asked a question that has never stopped reverberating. He asked, "Where is everybody?" It was not a whimsical question. Fermi was not a whimsical man. He was a man who understood numbers the way surgeons understand anatomy, as systems with functions, with failure points, with consequences. His question was surgical. The logic was straightforward. The galaxy is approximately 13.6 billion years old. Stars capable of supporting life have existed for most of that duration. If even a fractionally small percentage of those stars harbored civilizations, and if even a fractionally small percentage of those civilizations developed the capacity for space travel, then the arithmetic demanded one inevitable conclusion. We should have been visited, many times over. No one came. In 1960, an astronomer named Frank Drake pointed a radio telescope at two nearby stars. He called the project Ozma, after the queen of a fictional land that was difficult to reach and populated with strange beings. He listened for 150 hours. He heard nothing. But Drake was not deterred. He was, like most scientists of his era, a man animated by a specific and durable faith, the faith that the universe was structured to produce life, that life was structured to produce intelligence, and that intelligence was structured to produce radio signals. This was not a scientific conclusion. It was a prior conviction dressed in the language of science. In 1961, Drake gathered a small conference of astronomers and proposed an equation. It became known as the Drake equation. It multiplied variables together: the rate of star formation, the fraction of stars with planets, the fraction of those planets that could support life, the fraction where life emerged, the fraction where intelligence emerged, the fraction where technology emerged, and finally, the average lifespan of a communicating civilization. The equation was elegant. It was also, in retrospect, a document of extraordinary wishful thinking. Drake estimated that there might be between 1,000 and 100 million communicating civilizations in our galaxy alone. The number implied contact was not merely possible, it was inevitable. The decades that followed were decades of listening. SETI, the search for extraterrestrial intelligence, became an institutional project. Telescopes were built, frequencies were monitored, programs were funded, Defunded, privately refunded. The technology improved continuously. The sensitivity of the instruments became extraordinary. By the late 20th century, we could detect signals that a civilization like ours might have emitted from hundreds of light years away. The silence did not break. In August of 1977, a volunteer named Jerry Ehman was reviewing data from the Big Ear radio telescope at Ohio State University. He was scanning a printout, the kind produced by a computer the size of a room, characters printed in columns on continuous paper. He found a signal so strong, so structured, so precisely aligned with the expected frequency of an extraterrestrial transmission that he circled it with a red pen and wrote one word in the margin: "Wow." The signal was never detected again, despite systematic searches, despite dedicated observation campaigns, despite the full application of every technological resource available to the global scientific community across the subsequent 5 decades. The WOW signal is referred to in SETI literature as an anomaly, a candidate, a point of interest. I have a different term for it: a phantom limb, the sensation of something that should be there, felt so acutely that the brain constructs its presence in the absence of the physical fact. The WOW signal is what hope looks like when it has been waiting long enough to start hallucinating. The radio is still silent. The equation is still beautiful. These two facts have not yet been reconciled.
You have been taught to think of space as a frontier.
This is a category error. A frontier implies something beyond it, a civilization waiting to be encountered, resources waiting to be extracted, a narrative waiting to unfold. The frontier is a concept invented by societies in motion, societies that require perpetual expansion as a psychological substrate. It is not a description of what space is. It is a projection of what certain cultures need space to be. Strip the projection away. Apply only what the instruments return. What you have is a void, not an empty void. Space is filled with matter, with radiation, with gravitational architectures of extraordinary complexity, but a void of the specific thing we are searching for, a void of others. The observable universe contains an estimated 2 trillion galaxies. Each galaxy contains on average hundreds of billions of stars. Approximately 1 in 5 of those stars is Sun-like. Approximately 1 in 5 of those stars has a planet in what we call the habitable zone, close enough to receive warmth, far enough to permit liquid water. The arithmetic produces a number so large it is essentially meaningless to human cognition. The number of potentially life-bearing planets in the observable universe is estimated at 40 billion billion. 40 billion billion. And the radio is silent. This is not a puzzle. It is not a curiosity. It is not an invitation to wonder. It is a crime scene. The body is missing. The witnesses are absent. The forensic evidence points in every direction simultaneously and converges on a conclusion so unpleasant that the scientific community has spent 70 years developing sophisticated frameworks for not stating it plainly. Let me state it plainly. Something is systematically eliminating or preventing the emergence of intelligent communicating civilizations. Not occasionally, not in isolated cases, systematically. With a consistency that operates across billions of years and hundreds of billions of solar systems. Whatever this mechanism is, it is not a coincidence. It is a structure. The Fermi Paradox is not the observation that we are alone. We don't know with certainty that we are alone. The Fermi Paradox is the observation that the silence itself is impossible, given everything we know about the scale and age of the universe, unless something is operating on intelligence the way natural selection operates on genetics. As a filter. and we are standing directly in its path. In 1998, an economist named Robin Hanson published an essay. It was not widely read outside academic circles. It was titled, "The Great Filter: Are We Almost Past It?" The title was optimistic in the way that a coroner asking whether the patient might survive is optimistic. Hanson's argument was clean. If the universe should be full of intelligent civilizations, but is instead silent, then there must exist, somewhere in the developmental sequence from inert matter to galaxy-spanning civilization, a step of such extraordinary difficulty that almost nothing survives it. He called it the Great Filter. The mechanism could be located at many points in the sequence. It could be that the emergence of life itself is nearly impossible, that we are an accident of such spectacular improbability that it has happened only once or a handful of times in the entire observable universe. The filter, in this scenario, is already behind us. We passed through it. We are the anomaly. This is the comfortable interpretation. It is also, structurally, the least supported by available evidence. Because we know from the geological and paleontological record that life on Earth emerged relatively quickly after conditions permitted it, within a few 100 million years of the planet cooling sufficiently to permit liquid water, single-celled life appeared. This suggests that the transition from chemistry to biology is not the filter. Life is not the improbable step. We are, it seems, a common accident. Then the question becomes, what killed everyone else? Every civilization that achieves the capacity to produce a detectable signal has, by definition, achieved the capacity for industrialized technology. Industrialized technology requires the exploitation of energy. The exploitation of energy at industrial scale generates systemic consequences, thermodynamic, chemical, ecological, that operate on timescales faster than biological evolution can process. There is a pattern in this. A civilization emerges. It optimizes for local competitive advantage, the logic of evolution transferred to the level of social organization. It masters chemistry. It masters physics. It converts its planetary resources into functional infrastructure with a speed that the planet's self-regulating systems cannot accommodate. And then it confronts, in the same window of its own technological adolescence, both the capacity to destroy itself and the necessity of not doing so. This window is narrow. It may be very narrow. The question the Great Filter poses is not, can a civilization survive? The question is, what is the probability that a civilization survives its own intelligence? Hanson's analysis suggests the answer is close to zero. Not because civilizations are malevolent. Malevolence is too simple, too intentional a concept. The mechanism is subtler. It is the logic of optimization. Every civilization optimizes. Optimization at insufficient scale produces local survival. Optimization at sufficient scale produces systemic collapse. The intelligence that allows a species to master its environment is the same intelligence that destabilizes the conditions that made the environment masterable. This is not a malfunction. It is the algorithm operating exactly as designed. Civilization is a self-terminating program. It runs, it compiles, it executes, and somewhere in the execution, somewhere between the discovery of fire and the weaponization of the atom, somewhere between the first radio signal and the last, it reaches the line of code that ends the process. The filter is not a wall, it is a logic error, one that replicates, apparently, across every substrate on which intelligence runs. In 1974, scientists at the Arecibo Observatory in Puerto Rico broadcast a message toward a star cluster called M13, located approximately 25,000 light-years from Earth. The message contained information about our mathematics, our chemistry, our solar system, our biology, our technology. It was a detailed self-portrait of our civilization. At the speed of light, the message will arrive at M13 in approximately 24,975 years. If anyone there decodes it and responds immediately, we will receive their reply in roughly 50,000 years, by which time, if current trajectories hold, we will not be here to receive it. The irony in this is not incidental. It is the central structural irony of the entire SETI project, and it has been noted and filed and largely set aside. We are searching for extraterrestrial intelligence while operating an economy that is measurably destabilizing the atmospheric chemistry of the only biosphere we possess. We are scanning the frequencies for evidence of other minds, while our political architectures fail repeatedly and systematically to coordinate responses to threats we ourselves have identified and quantified. SETI is, among other things, a monument to the specific human capacity to direct intellectual resources toward problems located at maximum distance from the immediate crisis. The signals we have been broadcasting, not intentionally but as the byproduct of a century of radio and television transmission, have already told the universe something about us. The pattern of our electromagnetic leakage, if decoded by a sufficiently advanced civilization, would reveal the structure of our civilization with considerable clarity. It would show them the speed of our technological development. It would show them the scale of our resource consumption. It would show them the gap, the widening, documented, increasingly urgent gap between our technological capacity and our organizational coherence. If there is anyone listening, they can calculate the trajectory. They can see where the curve goes. There is a specific madness in this that requires acknowledgement. The technological systems we build to search for others are products of the same civilization whose continuation is most seriously threatened by the technological systems it builds. The telescope and the carbon emission emerge from the same industrial base. The radio observatory and the weapons system are funded by the same governmental apparatus. The search for extraterrestrial intelligence is conducted by a species that has not yet demonstrated intelligence sufficient to ensure its own persistence. SETI is not a program for survival. SETI is a consolation. It is the act of knocking on the neighbor's door while your own house burns. It is the dream of community projected onto a universe that has already, by the evidence, demonstrated that community is either impossible or terminal. We broadcast our presence before we learned to survive ourselves. That is not an irony. That is the mechanism. That is how the filter operates. There is another possibility. It is not comforting. The standard interpretations of the Fermi Paradox assume that silence means absence. No signal means no civilization. This assumption is structurally naive. It assumes that communication is a goal. It assumes that advanced civilizations broadcast their existence for the same reason that adolescent civilizations do, because they have not yet understood the cost. In 2008, a Chinese science fiction author named Liu Cixin published a novel. The novel's title, translated, is The Dark Forest. Its central proposition is not fantastical. It is a logical derivation from first principles. The argument runs as follows. Every civilization in the universe faces the same fundamental conditions. First, survival is the primary drive of any civilization that has persisted long enough to be detectable. Second, resources are finite. The universe contains matter and energy in fixed quantities. Third, civilizations cannot reliably assess the intentions of other civilizations because intentions can change
and because the distances involved in interstellar space make real-time communication impossible. You cannot negotiate in real time with a civilization 40 light-years away. These three conditions produce a single inevitable logic. If you detect another civilization and you cannot verify its intentions, and you know that if it is hostile and you do nothing you will be destroyed, then the only rational action is preemptive elimination. Not aggression, not cruelty, logic. The universe, on this model, is a dark forest. Every civilization is a hunter moving through it in silence. To make a sound is to announce your position. To announce your position is to invite targeting. The civilizations that survived are not the most cooperative, the most communicative, the most interested in contact. They are the ones that went quiet. The ones that broadcast, the young ones, the optimistic ones, the ones still operating on the evolutionary assumption that resources are abundant and cooperation is net positive, are the ones that get found. And the ones that get found do not persist long enough to appear in any subsequent census. This is a testable prediction. On the dark forest model, we would expect to observe a universe in which intelligent civilizations are not detectable. We would expect silence. We would expect no signals, no megastructures, no evidence of civilizational expansion. We observe exactly this. The silence on this reading is not the absence of intelligence, it is the signature of intelligence. The ones who understood the logic went dark. The ones who didn't were eliminated. The universe is not empty, it is disciplined. Every civilization that survived long enough did so by mastering the fundamental lesson of the cosmos. That lesson is, do not speak. We have been speaking since 1888, when Heinrich Hertz first generated a radio wave. We have been broadcasting our position, our population, our technological level, our geopolitical instability, our precise orbital coordinates. If the dark forest is real, then the Arecibo message was not an introduction, it was a confession. And confessions in a dark forest have consequences.
There is a third possibility. It does not involve catastrophe. It does not involve silence as strategy. It involves a direction of travel that we have not yet conceptually mapped because we are too early in the process to recognize it as a direction. Consider the trajectory of human technology. For 10,000 years, the primary vector of civilizational development was outward, expansion, territory, the conversion of the external world into controllable infrastructure. Every empire in history has been organized around this logic. The frontier was always the measure of vitality. Then, in the late 20th century, something changed. The most significant cultural and economic transformation of the last 50 years did not involve the colonization of new physical territory. It involved the construction of a new substrate, the internet, virtual environments, digital economies. The average citizen of a developed nation now spends more time each day in digital space than in physical nature. The most valuable companies in the world produce nothing physical. They sell attention. They sell simulated experience. They sell the architecture of virtual space. This is not an aberration. This is a phase transition. A sufficiently advanced civilization, one that has solved the engineering problems of energy generation and computational substrate, would face a simple comparison. The physical universe is vast, cold, and hostile. The distances between stars are so extreme that even at near light speed, traversal takes human lifetimes. The resources required for interstellar travel are by any current engineering estimate prohibitive. Simulated space, by contrast, is arbitrarily large, arbitrarily configured, and can be expanded by adding compute. The laws of physics within it are programmable. The experience of subjective duration is adjustable. A civilization that has achieved sufficient computational density could construct interior universes of unbounded complexity and populate them with experiences that exceed in richness and stimulation anything the physical cosmos offers. Why would they leave? The philosopher Nick Bostrom has argued with formal rigor that we may already be living in such a simulation. This is not the relevant point here. The relevant point is the incentive structure. The relevant point is that the most rational terminal behavior for a sufficiently advanced civilization may not be expansion into physical space, but contraction into computational space. Not starships, servers, not galaxies, rendered environments with perfect physics, perfect sensory fidelity, and the ability to instantiate a billion subjective years within a physical nanosecond. On this model, the universe is not silent because it is empty. It is silent because its most advanced occupants have left the surface. They have migrated inward into architectures we cannot detect because they are not broadcasting. They are not broadcasting because they have no reason to. The outside world holds nothing they require. What would remain? Hardware, power generation systems, cooling infrastructure, machines of extraordinary complexity, drawing energy from their local star, processing it into computational substrate, running worlds within worlds within worlds, their outer shells dark and quiet and utterly indistinguishable from dead matter. We may already be surrounded by them. Planets that look inert, that return no signals, that appear to be nothing more than rock and gas and radiation, may be the physical housing of civilizations so advanced that the concept of communicating with an uncontacted species has the same salience for them that contacting a colony of ants has for us. Not hostility, not silence as strategy, simply the problem is no longer interesting to them. We search the spectrum for coherent signals. We look for modulated radio waves, for laser pulses, for the waste heat signatures of Dyson spheres. We are looking for civilizations that behave like us, that are outward-facing, expansion-driven, signal-emitting. We may be looking for the wrong signature entirely. The most advanced civilizations may have passed through the phase of outward expansion the way a child passes through the phase of reaching for everything in the room, and moved beyond it into an interior architecture so rich that the physical universe, which we experience as staggering in its scale and complexity, registers to them as nothing more than a lobby. The universe is full. We just cannot see what it is full of, because what it is full of is inside. We have completed the autopsy. The silence is real. The filter is systemic. The irony is structural. Those who survived went dark. Those who transcended became unreachable. The void has already consumed the rest. We are told that cosmic loneliness is the terrifying outcome, the single candle, the accident, the pale dot with no one else in the frame. But alone is not the most terrifying architecture. Alone means the filter is behind us. The terrifying architecture is being next, being the latest entry in a long sequence. The civilization that arrives at the window checks the instruments and sees exactly what every civilization before it saw. Clean frequencies, empty sky, beautiful, annihilating silence. The silence is not the unknown. The silence is the answer. And the radio keeps broadcasting into a void that has heard this before and said nothing back.